Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Empowered Woman podcast, celebrating courageous women who turned struggles into success. I'm your host, Nicole Ananda, and for the last 20 years, as a certified life coach and a healing arts professional, I've supported women to live a life of passion, power, and purpose so they can experience more love, joy, and success. If you are ready to ignite your life, please subscribe to this channel, to the Empowered Women, and become a part of our community where excuses hold no power, resilience reigns, transformation happens, authentic power is created, and wise women lift each other up higher and higher. Today's guest is my dear friend. She's such a magnetic and intelligent woman. I love her so much. Her name is Lisa Manyon, and she is the president of Right On Creative and the author of the award-winning book, which I've read, Spiritual Sugar. She teaches, trains, and transforms on two core topics: marketing with integrity and healing with love. So to learn more about Lisa, you can visit her website, Right On Creative, and that's WRITE on creative.com and spiritualsugar.com. And she has an amazing story to tell, as all these beautiful women who are coming on, these courageous, courageous women. And I just love all the challenges that you've been through and how you've met them with such amazing wisdom and alchemized and transformed so much in your life and have created so many amazing things. So thank you for joining us, Lisa. And I can't wait for our listeners to hear your courageous story. And then we'll just have a great conversation. I'm so excited.
Awesome. Well, thank you, of course, so much for having me. It's always an honor to connect with you. And I'm so excited that you did read the book. You were part of the advanced praise team, one of the people that I trusted to see it before anybody else saw it. So
Woohoo!
that's a big thing. And, that is a big part of the journey, right? And one of the things that I have learned as, on my entrepreneurial journey and running Right On Creative for 20 years, it's interesting the similar but different trajectories that our paths have taken. We have to course correct. It's what happens, and you mentioned the award-winning book. Well, many people were waiting for a book on marketing. And that's not what happened. What happened was life happened, right? And what happens sometimes is we just have to course correct and we have to roll with it. And we have to follow those divine God nudges and where source is leading us. And sometimes it's not even remotely close to where we thought we were going.
Oh my gosh, isn't that the truth? I literally just got off the phone with somebody. We were talking about that same thing, about the ability to pivot in our lives and how much courage and resiliency it takes, because some people can be so attached to the life that they think they're supposed to be living, or the life that kind of was planned by them to live. And then when something happens, you really have a choice. Like you said, it's like kind of going in whatever direction. If you pivot and you go with the nudges, it can be a lot easier, right? I mean, in many ways, we go into like that flow. If we resist it, well, it can get into a deep, dark hole. And so I would love to hear, yeah, like how did you pivot and what kind of courage and resiliency it took to do that? And maybe at the beginning it was like, I don't have the courage, or maybe I felt fear or whatever, but you navigated through it. So
Yeah, and I love that you use the word pivot because, even when working in the marketing realm of things and I'm helping people with their planning and their strategy, which can be a real challenge for people sometimes. And sometimes people get so rigid, they're like, "Oh, but this is the plan. I can't deviate from it." And I'm like, "You have to." And in fact, one of the things that I teach in one of my processes, the power planning process, is the final P is pliability, because you have to be able to roll with the punches. You have to be able to change it. And the other thing too is just giving people permission to know that the plan is yours. It can change. You just because you made the plan doesn't mean you have to stick to it. And
right.
and also you will not be sticking to the plan if that is not the plan that the divine powers have in store for you, because quite frankly, we're not actually in control. So yeah, you're right. I was it was 2017 and I was on top of the world. Things were rolling. I was super happy. I knew something was kind of going on with my health, wasn't sure what, and I faced a really massive diagnosis of throat cancer. And So as a woman who is helping other women primarily, of course, I do work with men as well, but primarily serving women to help them turn their ideas into something that matters and really amplify their voice and work with messaging and all of that. Wow. I was sitting in a spot of, whoa, I might not even have a voice anymore. What am I going to do with all of this?
Isn't that so fascinating that like the voice became the part of your body that had this challenge and you were teaching people about how to open their voice and what their message and what their self-expression is. I mean, isn't that just the kick? You're like, oh, the irony in God right there.
So fascinating. It's like, okay, so if we look at the chakra systems and we look at the throat chakra and we look at, disease manifesting there, it's about what are we saying and what are we not saying. I mean, we can look to the work of Louise Hay and Ina Segal and Yvette Rose, who have all done really amazing work in understanding, those nudges and why our bodies responds to different emotions and suppressed emotions like it does. And then most recently I've been digging into some German new medicine studies, which is kind of like all of those bodies of work rolled into one, but amplified, and it goes into the psychological roots of disease. So, we're getting a little technical there, but the bottom line is, everything truly is energy. So I had some things that I needed to work through, some things that I hadn't fully dealt with, fully expressed, and fully shared. And it doesn't mean that it's something that we have to, jump on the rooftop and scream it to the world, but we do have to go in and do that inner work to
Mm.
transform and transmute things. And I assure you that the people who have been watching my trajectory for, decades in the marketing realm and me teaching marketing with integrity were waiting for a marketing book. And
Yeah.
that is not what I was designed to create at this time. Will I at some point? Maybe. But what was really knocking was the story of healing with love. And it was, it's facing mortality is simply not for the faint of heart. It is a massive journey. You look at everything in your life, you take a massive inventory. And, I was thankful that I have a really, really solid foundation of faith, because it was that faith and being in nature and lots of meditation and lots of prayer and lots of different modalities, including breath work, that helped
Mhm.
me move through all of this. And, it takes so much. And the other thing that I want to say about that is it came down to also me being empowered to really trust my intuition even more, right?
Mm.
So, um, I don't want to point fingers at individuals, but what I do want to say is that we're having some real challenges in our healthcare system right now. We have some things going on in the industrial medical complex that are breaking away, falling to the wayside, and people are under a lot of stress, the doctors included. And so that was true even in 2017 when I was going through this whole journey and I was misdiagnosed. I was told I had an abscessed tooth, which I knew wasn't true because I'm, pretty much in my body. Actually, what's interesting about that is I did have to have surgery. I didn't do chemo or radiation, but after the surgery, I felt more in my body than I had ever felt my entire life.
And why is that? Why do you think so?
That's a really good question. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's because I really had to look deeply at everything that was kind of standing in my way of really expressing my true, authentic self. Even though I thought I had been, sometimes we can think we're on the right track, but we will be shaken to places where we never thought we were going to go, to be shown and for that truth to be illuminated, whether we like it or not. It's not always fun. It's pretty messy, really.
It is.
But
I have a
yeah.
question about that because that's so interesting what you just said. And it's kind of like I could imagine a listener going, well, how do I know if I'm actually expressing my authentic truth? Like, what would be some of the things that would be an indication that I'm not, other than, let's say, having a life transforming disease happen, or let's say, there's emotions that are underneath it, there's the psychological root component that you talked about. Like, how would someone know? Like, what would be some of those signs for them?
Well, unfortunately, a lot of times we don't know. And the reason is we're on autopilot and we're
Mm.
pushing ourselves to do too much. And we're not really slowing down and tapping into what our bodies are saying to us. And so we are taught to push through, to not
Mm.
complain, to, and also to trust our doctors explicitly. And I am going to say that we need to trust ourselves explicitly. and
Mm.
we need to trust the creator explicitly, because doctors are taught very specific tracks of education that are put together by design with many different influences involved. And so they're great people. I'm not bashing doctors at all. I mean, I'm so grateful for Western medicine. And at the same time, if we limit ourselves to one modality and one train of thought and one set of beliefs, then we're also limiting other opportunities and possibilities to heal.
I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. And it's so interesting, like my own path, how many modalities I went like full into. And I'm like, this is the one, that is going to cure all. And there is no cure all. There's no cure all. We have so many, we're so multifaceted and multidimensional that you do need to create kind of like this comprehensive toolkit. I know your book has a lot of information in it around kind of different tools and ways that you can navigate. But it is true, it's like you can't just sink your teeth into one thing, and not that one thing may work for one person but not for another. So there's so much customization that has to come into play. So I love how you said you really need to learn to trust your intuition, and then allow other people maybe to guide you when you might feel confused or lost, but they're not playing God either, right? So they're just going to give you what they know, and that's their perspective, and there's nothing wrong with that, but that's not the end, right, of the journey. It's to gather what we need and bring it back to being pliable, right? You need pliability. Things will shift, right?
Yeah, it's so true. And I mean, I cannot express enough how grateful I am for all of the healing team that came together to help. And you mentioned that I mentioned a lot of the modalities in the book, and I do. I actually overview over 30, and I call them spiritual tools. It's ancient wisdom, basically, that we can use to ground ourselves and to help heal. And I left out so many things. I'll probably write another book because I've learned a lot more since then. But it's really important to know that there is no one size fits all for healing, particularly with cancer. Many people have said to me, Lisa, tell us your recipe. What did you do? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I did all kinds of things. I actually joined some women. They had me zoom into one of their book club discussions to talk about my book because it was their book club selection. And one of the questions was, the lady said, you couldn't have possibly tried all those modalities. I said, oh, I absolutely did. And there's more that I didn't even put in there. I don't write about things that I haven't done. I'm like, I tried them. Do I incorporate all 30 things into my daily rituals? Absolutely not. There's no possible way anyone could, right?
No,
But
yeah.
it was, you got to try it on and see if it works and go from there. And that's why the subtitle of the book is The Divine Ingredients to Heal Yourself with Love, because I've given a bunch of different ingredients, but you have to pull them together to create your own recipe. I cannot give anybody a recipe for that. There's no one that can. If there was a specific cure-all and a magic wand to wave over everyone and have this miracle cure for cancer, it would be done. And that hasn't happened yet. I mean, I'm holding out hope. Don't get me wrong. I'd love to see that happen because I don't want anyone to have to go through what I went through. And that's kind of why I wrote the book. It's not all about cancer. It's really about self-care. It's about, look, let's course correct and take care of ourselves now before you have to face some kind of a major wake-up call like I did. And what's really scary is the stats are now that 1 in 2 people in this lifetime will be diagnosed with some form of cancer.
Wow, I didn't realize that. That's an incredible number. I mean,
It is.
I know that's like six probably women in the last several years, you included, that have not only, it's exactly what you said, not only have they had cancer, but they've all had different forms of cancer, and they've all healed themselves. But some went more of a, like, let's say, Western route to some degree. Some did it completely naturally, and some it was kind of this hybrid of both. And what I recognized with everybody is there's a level of comfort that people receive knowing about the certain tools that they know about, right? So it could be, well, I know meditation helped, but I also did this, or I know that I went to, one of my friends went to India and got Mother Ganges, and I had a spiritual experience. And in all of them, though, there's kind of this come to Jesus moment, if you will, that is kind of like the eye opener of like, wow, there's all these things that I hadn't integrated in my life, or all these whether it's, whatever the emotion is, whether it's resentment or whatever, and they recognize, oh, I've been holding all this for so long, and that's festered literally in my body and has created this experience to learn, to get to that deeper level of learning. So it's an amazing journey. I'm so fascinated by your own journey, and what you've got.
Oh, listen, I'm fascinated by it too, and I'm the one that went through it. I'm still like, how did that even happen? But the truth is tapping into that faith and tapping into my intuition and knowing that when a doctor who is supposed to be the authority is telling you, this medical professional is telling you, oh no, it's just an abscess tooth, you're going to be okay. And you know that that isn't true, and you're having to push against the establishment.
Mm,
And it's not necessarily that medical provider's fault, so to speak. They are working inside the confines of the Western industrial medical complex, which has become a business. Clearly, it is. And people have to be pushed through in a certain time frame, and oftentimes they only have 6 to 8 minutes to spend with a patient, right? Depending on the modality. And so that makes it very difficult to diagnose anything, I would say. So that's why so many people are like, why weren't you just super furious at that person? And I said, at first I was, and it would have been really easy to be in my egoic, human constructs and project that. But I'm like, no, Lisa, let's look at this. Let's take ownership, move on, release that person, get people on your medical team that are really going to listen to you and
hmm
that are going to help you get what you need to get and go forward. And that's what I did. And I I'm grateful that I did. And, I don't hold a grudge against anyone in this situation. You just have to make sure that you're advocating for yourself
hmm
because everyone, I mean, I think it's really interesting. Everyone in the medical field is practicing medicine, practicing.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So they're still learning too.
hmm hmm
And so we have to give grace there as well. And know that sometimes we will bring information to the table that they're not going to have, specifically about nutrition and how that plays a role into our health as well. So we've got our mental and our physical and our emotional and just our physical health, all of it. And eating clean was a big part. I was not a big juicer prior to this. Now I juice greens regularly and make sure that I'm really fueling my body with great food and realizing like, oh, maybe I shouldn't pop that in the microwave because the microwave actually removes all the nutrients from the food. Sure, it's great and convenient, but then you're eating food that is not
Yeah.
nutrient rich. So what do? You slow down. And this is the thing that's the most challenging for me. And I think for everyone across the board is that we're living in a fast-paced society and we're going and pushing ourselves so hard to do all these different things. And we kind of were forced to slow down the past several years when the whole pandemic thing happened. But then we start getting back into routines. Nothing's going to be normal again. I'm just
Right.
going to say that right now. But we get into these new routines and then we realize, oh gosh, we're on autopilot again and we need to slow down and take time to create really delicious meals for ourselves. Don't eat the fast food. Don't eat the stuff that is full of the processed poisonous things that somehow are approved by the FDA. I have no idea how.
I know.
That's another tangent. I
Another.
probably much about that, but it's just true. It's like these are broken systems. They need to be fixed, and they're probably not going to be fixed anytime soon. So we have to take the initiative to do whatever we can to fuel our mind, body, spirits with the best information and food and fuel and environments that we possibly can.
Amen, sister, on that one. It's like I remember becoming a yoga teacher a long time ago, and they would start to talk about like energy systems and the asana practice in yoga, but they never talked about food, until I got into like one of the programs, and they're talking about how Ayurveda, the science of food, was always part of yoga. It was never separated, until it started coming over to the West. So food as a science was always a yogic practice. And then I was like, that blew my mind like wide open on the whole topic. And that I was pretty young, I guess, at that time. I was in my 20s, I think, still. And it really sent me down that path of trying to understand the importance of food and food as medicine and all the things that you're talking about now. and how far removed, we were as a Western culture from all of that. So I appreciate that you just talked about that. And there's many people out there that still, I mean, I dated a doctor and he was very indoctrinated into the Western practice of medicine. And I know it's changing, but they never studied nutrition. And he probably ate the worst out of anyone. He would know. I feel comfortable saying that. We used to get in arguments about it because I would come home talking about Ayurveda and eating cleanly and organically and whole foods and things. And he'd say, it's just calories in, calories out. And literally had like Twinkies in the closet and 8 tons of sugar, like 7 Mountain Dews a day. Like, I'm not even joking. I'm like, how is this person actually alive? And ironically, on the outside, he had an amazing body. So he was just like gifted with the right genes on that superficial level. But it is interesting because when you look at somebody, you can't tell necessarily, I mean, how they're eating. So someone
Right.
would say, "Oh, you're healthy, you're fine, you're a yogi." They could say that to me behind closed doors. Even if I'm thin, I could be eating tons of sugar, processed foods, and no one would ever even think to ask. Isn't that so interesting?
It's really interesting, and I like that you bring that up because, this is kind of embarrassing, but I wrote about it in the book, and I'll be totally transparent. When I was diagnosed, I was technically obese. I was carrying 189 pounds on my 5'7" frame, and that's technically obese. And when I saw that in writing, it freaked me out. And I realized it was because I was eating all the things I loved, chocolate, wine, cheese, all these things, which I still love, but I quit them cold turkey for a period of time while I was healing. So no wine, no chocolate, no cheese, all processed sugar, got rid of all that, and coffee. And I was a coffee snob. I would grind my own beans every morning and drink a whole full French press myself, all of that. And it was a big reset for me. It was a massive reset. And as a result of doing all of that and walking, I released 40 pounds. And people
Wow.
will say to me, "Oh my gosh, you got sick, so you lost weight." I'm like, "No, I got healthy, so I lost weight." I
Hmm.
believe that the cancer diagnosis was a true blessing for me.
Yeah.
It really was. And I think that we have to listen to those wake-up calls. We really do. And I'll tell you, it wasn't easy to embrace that and to follow that path because I had, everything in my little type A mind all planned out, and like this is not what was supposed to happen. And I was just supposed to be, I was actually in the process of writing the marketing book. It's still in process, but it came to a complete halt. And the message that needed to be shared was this message of spiritual sugar, this message of really tapping in and healing yourself with love. And a lot of people were like, "What has happened to Lisa? Has she just gone insane?" No, not actually. I've always been a multi-passionate person, and I think this will really resonate with the audience. It's okay to be multi-passionate. We are coached to only focus on one thing. For those of us who are multi-passionate, that is impossible. If I were told that I could only do one thing for the rest of my life, I think my head would explode.
I feel the same way. I love the whole multi-passionate. I learned that term a few years ago, I think, and I was like, that's me. Finally, I'm free because I'm the same way. I love being creative, and the creative process is not to pigeonhole you, at least, and me. We like all the things. So I love that you just brought that up.
Yeah, I think it's important because I think oftentimes when we're coached to focus on one thing, it can actually be damaging and detrimental. And I know that I went through different periods of time in my, the Right On Creative business where I was told, "Oh no, look, I'm really good at branding and image and planning and strategy and the copy and messaging and publicity and PR." And that's like the whole gamut. That's the four core foundational pieces that you have to have in place for long-term sustainability. But I'd be coached like, "Oh no, you can only focus on one thing." So I kind of broke it up and tried different things throughout the years. Like, "Oh, let's focus on press releases. Let's just focus on web copy. Let's just focus on this." And the fact of the matter is it it was not as beneficial
Mm.
as me just saying, "Listen, this is who I am. I can help you with these things. This is the direct pathway to do that work with me." And instead, I was trying to basically fit myself, a round peg into a square slot, and it's like, wait a minute, or a square peg into a round hole, however you want to say it, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Either way, they don't fit, right?
Right.
And so um, what I think is so freeing about having faced mortality, now having the book published and out, and it winning an award, and it really being my love letter to humanity, seeing the difference that it makes, and seeing that it's making as much, if not more, of an impact of the energetic work that I did in the marketing realm to teach marketing with integrity. It's different, but it's related. And I believe 100% that business is personal. And it's okay for us to be human. That's the other thing, that oftentimes we're taught and coached to be these untouchable, perfect people, and nobody is that. We
Right.
have to keep it real. And if
Mm.
we don't, we're doing a disservice to ourselves, to the people that we serve. And it's certainly not helping to repair these broken threads of humanity that we all have a responsibility to repair in our own way, whatever that might be.
I love that you just said that. And I love how you like brought it to the business is personal. I say it slightly differently to clients, but I'm always saying your business is a reflection of you. And if you are out of alignment, if you are unwell, if you are dealing with emotional stress, that just ripples into your business. And so people always wonder, how did my business go down the tubes, or how did this happen with my business? It's all these external circumstances. And no, it's actually your consciousness reflected as a business, you know. So if you're struggling in certain ways in your business, what is that inside of you that is actually struggling with those things, whether it's self-worth or what have you, right? So it's a really interesting concept, you know, and I think the more we kind of wrap our heads around that as entrepreneurs, that it's really about ourselves, and that's the creative output of ourselves, you know, and we're here to serve others. We also need to serve ourselves, right?
We really do. And I love that you bring that up, because throughout my business right on creative, it's always been very structured. Certainly there's creativity there, but there was a very specific way that I was showing up in the world. And it was very much, unshakable. I'm really good at this. This is what I'm doing. Boom. And then facing mortality, I was broken wide open. And it was a choice point. Am I going to be real, raw, and vulnerable with the people who have trusted me all these years? Or am I going to just try to pretend that everything's fine?
Mm,
And while going through the journey, I did keep it quiet, but I knew all along that I was to be writing this book, I was to share it with the world. And some things are meant to be kept private while you're going through them, even when you have a public persona, which makes it tricky, as you and I both know,
mhm.
right? It's an interesting balance that we have as public figures, so to speak. And so we also have a responsibility with that, right? And that's another choice point. And we can choose to, you know, put on pretenses, or we can choose to keep it real. And I choose to keep it real. And people really appreciate that. And also, for all of you who aren't quite there yet, we see you when you're not doing it.
Yeah. Well, it's like performance in a way, right? It's really interesting, and I love how you brought that back to that. And how did like what, you know, for I think of our viewers, like what does it take to be real and raw? Like what are the fears they might have to overcome to do that? Like, and how did you kind of get through these, you know? Because it is
Yeah,
balance. I love how you brought it back to balance.
that's such a big one. There were so many emotions that came up. There was, what the weirdest one of all was guilt and shame for ever getting sick. That
Mm.
doesn't even make a lot of sense. I'm still kind of unpacking that one, because I'm like, that's so weird, but it's so true. I'm like, I should have never gotten sick. But it was like beating myself up for not knowing what I don't know, which doesn't make
Right.
any sense, right? Because
Yeah.
until we've experienced it, how would we?
Yeah.
And so for me, I mean, I had to struggle with a lot of things. There was a lot of self-worth, because I was like, oh gosh, clearly I didn't take very good care of myself. I've gotten sick. And of course, I'm my own worst critic, and I think we all are. So I just want y'all to know we're human. This happens. And
Yeah.
I judge myself more than I judge anyone else ever.
Yeah.
And I'm working on that. I'm working on giving myself the space and grace to really ease into whatever it is that I want to do. whether it's talking about spiritual sugar, or it's talking about right on creative, or it's doing something completely different. Who even knows? But I think we have to give ourselves a lot of grace
Mhm.
and get support too. I didn't do this on my own. There was counseling, there were energy healers, there was all kinds of things that came into play that went far beyond any of the support I've ever received in business. And quite frankly, the support that I received on the journey of healing was far more impactful than any business support that I've ever received.
Well, and it's such a tender space and filled with so much like longing to really heal and find love and nurturance, right? That support piece is huge. Right now, as you know, like my mom passed on Friday, and I had this thought. That's why I asked you the question too. Is like I had these strange thoughts come across my field, which was like, I don't really want anyone to know about it. I'm kind of a private person. People might feel sorry for me. They don't know how to deal with it themselves. I don't want to put that on people. I mean, it was like all these wild thoughts, and I thought, what is that? All these ego thoughts. When I really boil it down, I just love my mom and I love my friends and community. And of course, I want to share this with them. And if I need to be held, I need to let go and not worry about what anybody's thinking, including myself. Just like accept the love, accept the support, stop trying to control what you think it might look like or what it should look like, and just sit back and receive. And so I did this Facebook video about my process just because I thought, well, I'll just share it. And I'm so glad that I did that, because I went from nobody knowing that my mom died and I was just going to do my own thing, to reach outs from high school people, college people, friends here, friends in LA, friends in San Francisco, my cousins. Like, it was like this outpouring of love. And I thought, that's exactly what my mom would want. My mom was like always trying to connect people and always talking to people. And so it was like, yeah, if I did it alone, I wouldn't have felt any of that love.
And so beautiful. I just want to say I saw
Oh,
your video, of course,
yeah.
and it just really touched my heart, and it was gorgeous. The snow was coming down. I mean, it was so magical. It was like you could feel your mom there with you. I'll probably start crying, but it was so
Yeah.
beautiful.
Thank you.
And I think that you really hit on something important about the sharing piece, because, I mentioned that I was struggling with guilt and shame about ever getting sick. And when I went through the whole journey, I did keep it quiet. There were people that were saying, do a GoFundMe, do all this stuff. And part of that was egoic. I will be straight up. I'm like, I shouldn't have to ask for help. And
Right.
that's a societal programming. It was not necessarily healthy. I did reach out to people who were in my sacred sphere of influence. I just chose to keep that a little bit more private. But the outpouring of that love from those people in that community was so important, just like you're experiencing now with sharing what happened with your mom. So we're not actually designed to do this on our own. And this is something that I really want everyone to hear. We are taught to hide behind personas. We're taught if we've got a public figure, we've got to, be stoic or whatever it is. We're taught all of these things that I really encourage you just to throw out the window and keep it real. Be vulnerable. When you need support, ask for it. I'm going to tell you, it's not easy for me still today. I'm really not that great at asking for help. I'm working on the receivership part of it. And this is all a part of our growing and evolving. And the other thing is if we're not vulnerable and we don't let people in, big things will happen, like you just shared. And we're not meant to go through those things by ourselves either. But if we don't open up and share, we're going to. And I think that loneliness and isolation are two of the most detrimental things that occur to entrepreneurs specifically. We put a lot of pressure on ourselves
Mhm.
and we think we've got to hold it all together for everyone. And the fact of the matter is, we were never designed to not be in community.
Right. We're still tribally wired, right?
Yeah.
It's so big. And I'm a part of a networking group right now, and the whole tenant, like the major pillar of their work is power partnerships, as she calls it, Jessica Hadari. And I walked in there, on the first call and I'm thinking, oh, we're going to work on marketing and messaging, which we do. But the key factor in almost every woman's expansion and growth in her group, which is a very large network, is about power partnerships and teaming up with women and saying, hey, this is what I'm working on. And when we get together in our brainstorms, we do talk like feedback about certain messages and things and just see what clarifies with certain audiences. But we're all each other's audience in a way. And so we're really getting real time feedback. But the other part of that is, here's my schedule for the year. Could you fit me into your newsletter in any of these months? Or, hey, I've got something coming up. Do you want to collab? Or, hey, what are you working on, sister? I'd love to help you out. And this kind of idea of sacred reciprocity and the giving and receiving. I love that you said receivership. I love to use that word as well. It's something I'm also working on. I was like, wow, I'm a lone wolf. I just do everything by myself with this kind of blinders on as an entrepreneur sometimes. And some days I'm like not even walking outside. And I think to myself, like, am I actually really enjoying life? And so it really opened my eyes to that, exactly what you said.
That question that you just asked yourself or stated, am I really actually enjoying life? That's something I really want people to think about, because here's what I learned. After facing mortality, I was so concerned about image, my business, all of these things. And yes, my business makes a big impact. But when we look at it and we look really objectively at what we're putting out in the world and who we are and what we're doing, does it really matter?
I love that question. Right.
I mean, really, like, does it really matter? And that's something that I cannot answer for anyone. You all have to answer that for yourselves. But I asked myself that a lot, and I let a lot of things go because I was like, you know what? It doesn't matter. I'm just holding on to things because I'm trying to create this false confine of structure of safety, when the fact of the matter is the safest place to be is in trust and in faith.
Hmm.
So, I mean, it's not easy to be there all the time. I got to say, it's still, there's moments, especially the past several years, where just the collective unrest and division was enough for me to kind of deregulate my own central nervous system, because I'm a highly sensitive person and an empath.
Yeah.
And so sometimes we are picking up on the collective energy on top of our own energy, and learning the tools to discern the difference is no small feat either, right? There's just so many layers to all of this. And it's a human experience, and it's messy.
Oh my gosh. How do you discern between collective trauma and thoughts and your own? I mean, it's such a big sometimes question in my own mind. I'm like, is this just me? Is it all of us? Like, do you have a practice that you tap into for that?
I do a lot of meditation and prayer and journaling around it, actually. And often if I start feeling really wonky, that's the best word I can come up with right now, is I'll be like, wait a minute, something's off. What's up? And I always say, if it doesn't feel right, it's probably not right. So what's not right within me? And is this mine, or is this, did I actually accidentally watch the news because I purposely don't watch the news because it's so
Right.
triggering? You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh. So I think we have to develop our own individual practices, and I can't say that I have it perfected. I think that anyone that says they have it perfected is probably not being 100% truthful with themselves, because it's difficult to tell sometimes. And sometimes there's emotions arising within us that we don't even realize are our own or where they're coming from. We may have
Right.
repressed something, we're complex. We're not simple beings here. We are
Mhm.
very complex with a lot of different needs, and we've pushed so many of those needs aside because society has taught us to be overachievers and to do all of these things, which, I'm still guilty of today. I have a hard time doing nothing. I
Oh,
work on it, but I
yeah.
can't. I'm like, I'm either walking around in nature, which isn't really doing nothing because I'm always meditating or getting downloads or something's happening, or even when I'm at home relaxing, I'm either reading or doing a puzzle or watching a video or listening to an audio or something that stimulates my brain and that keeps me moving forward. I'm not good at just doing nothing, except sometimes stillness meditation. If I sit there in stillness, I can perfect that for maybe 20 minutes.
I'm very similar to you. I mean, I don't see any differences as you speak that forward because even like silent meditation, I'll put on a timer and sometimes I'm just like open my eyes and look at the timer. Only a couple of minutes have gone by and I'm like, oh my God, I gotta wait till the timer's out. So I really try to push myself to that 20-minute mark. And sometimes it will go longer, which I appreciate. But I too, I'm always like ingesting podcasts and doing personal development work, and I do journal and things like that. I think for me, the biggest tool, if people are listening, has been the pendulum actually for me because it somehow helps me discern. Like I'll ask it a question and I'll look at that yes or no, and then I tune into my body and it's like having a question and answer session with my higher self, and that's kind of how I use the pendulum. And I've kind of recognized that the more I just sit, though, a lot of the answers just do come. So even a pendulum could be more of an active, meditation process.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I like that.
Mm.
Nature for me really brings it home all the
Uh,
time, just a nice walk in nature. And it's amazing how much more connected I feel. And that's one of the messages that I was guided to share in the book is that, as a collective, as humanity, we've kind of lost hope and faith. And many people don't believe in anything bigger than themselves anymore. They're like, how could we with all the things going on in the world?
right.
And I understand that. And I invite you just to go for a walk in nature. Even if you're in a big city, go to a park, take your shoes off, put your feet in the grass, feel the earth under your feet. It will reset you. It will help regulate you. It'll get you back in the groove with your circadian rhythm. You tap into the heartbeat of the earth, which is the Schumann resonancy. And there's so many things energetically that it does for you. And the other thing about being in nature is when you look around at nature, look at the trees that are beginning to bud and bloom and the plants and the flowers. There's absolutely no mistake that there's something bigger than us at play. That is evidence.
Oh yeah. I mean, the Fibonacci spiral and all these different like sacred geometries within nature and just the cycles and oh, it's so exquisite. Even that snowfall the other day, I was looking at the sky and saw millions of big snowflakes that were coming down. I don't know if you saw this yesterday. And it was dizzying. It was so enormous. I
I
thought,
did. I went out and looked at it. I was actually talking to a girlfriend on the phone and I said, "Oh my gosh, she would not believe how big these snowflakes are. I have to go out there."
oh, it was so stunning. But like if you looked up, it made you kind of dizzy because I would try to focus on one snowflake coming down and to think every snowflake is completely different. And I'm watching billions of snowflakes, in the sky just falling. It's like you can't, yeah, you kind of need to recognize the intelligence and the beauty behind that. And what's also interesting if people are watching about like if they want to connect with a higher power is some people have been sending me these NDs, these near death experience videos,
Hmm.
and they had a statistic in one show that was saying that like one in every, I think it was 25 people has near death experiences. It's not an uncommon thing, actually. And you might even call maybe getting cancer in a way a near death experience, right? Because you are diagnosed with something that feels closer to what you think maybe is your process of dying. And COVID was like the national near death experience where everyone had to face what their ideas were around death. And it's like when you hear these stories, it's fascinating, like there's definitely, it feels like something else happening at a grander scale. So I love that.
Absolutely. It's so true. And there's always something bigger than us at play, always. And one of the things that I didn't share is that I have a very strong faith and connection with the creator, and I get what are called God nudges or divine downloads. And 2 years prior to even receiving the diagnosis, I was sitting in my office and I got a download that said, "You're going to write a book. It's going to be called Spiritual Sugar. It's going to be about healing with love." So I did journal about it, but I had a freak out moment. I was like, "Hey, creator, you've got me teaching marketing with integrity, which is sort of an oxymoron in the whole, marketing, advertising, and copywriting arena. So people are finally catching on after me talking about, let's focus on passion points instead of pain points for decades. They're starting to catch on. And now you want me to do what?" I just journaled about it and set it aside. And then fast forward 2 years later, and I'm sitting in my office, sitting in inquiry, thinking, oh my gosh, is my body going to give out on me? Like, what's really going on here? What's happening? I knew it was something big. At that point, I didn't know if it was cancer or what it was. And I got another little download that said, don't worry, you're going to heal this with love. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's right. And I went and pulled out my old journal. I hadn't torched that one. Oftentimes I do, but I still had that one. And I opened it up and I was like, oh my gosh. And immediately on the spot bought the domain name. And I started building out the Spiritual Sugar platform, all divinely guided while going through the healing journey, knowing that I would be sharing this with people to hopefully inspire everyone who decides to read the book to take way better care of themselves and hopefully just avoid this wake-up call like I had. That's my biggest, deepest desire. I want everyone to just start eating clean food and moving and exercising and, fueling ourselves on every level with all the things that we need, so that hopefully we could just get healthy enough to eliminate cancer altogether. I mean, I know that's a tall order, but that's what I would like to see for humanity.
Yeah, I mean, so like if somebody were to say, I'm used to being in the medical arena and getting my insurance and having my doctor, and we know that there aren't that many things that is done, let's call it maintenance through the Western system, and they don't even know really what preventative things they can do. Obviously, they can go to your book, spiritualsugar.com, your website as well, and get some tools. Like one thing that might come up for people, I've heard this before, is like, well, how do you really afford all of these things, these other modalities? And it is true that some of these alternative modalities can add up, but what might one person do, you know?
So that's such a good question. So, gosh, so many layers there. So, yes, Western medicine is limited in what they have to offer, but they do have really good things to offer. We do want to look at supplementing, and in fact, I actually had some feedback from someone who read the book and who also participated in a presentation that I gave. I do some employee wellness programs and things like that to help people create commit to me plans. And because walking in nature was a big part of what I did, and eating organic and all of that, it was perceived that that was kind of coming from a place of privilege because not everyone can afford to be in nature that much or to buy organic food. So I'm going to start there with just saying that's a choice point. It's
Mm,
not a privilege, but what it is, it's not even about money. It's actually a time commodity thing,
mm,
because we can actually purchase food that is better for us than the processed, quick fix, easy stuff that you might get if you go through a drive-through or any of the prepackaged things in the store. We can purchase organic foods and prepare our meals for a similar cost, but it takes more time.
yeah, that you hit it right on the money right there. That is so true.
Yeah,
It's preparing
it
our food, and we can use that excuse of needing it fast in order to not do it. But is it really that? I mean, you can kind of gang meals together and do these things where you can get creative, right?
absolutely, you can do meal planning, and then to speak to spending copious amounts of time in nature. Well, yes, I am blessed because I did set my business up so that I can work and play anywhere that I want and live a freedom-based lifestyle. So there is that
And
piece. So
you
I've
did that though. You created that.
yes. So
Yeah.
I'll own that. And with that being said, it's about time. You can go home and you can sit in front of the TV and you can watch mindless television. Or you could go home and change and you could go to your local park. You could walk around the block. You could do anything to get out and be in nature. You could decide to, instead of sitting at your desk and eating your lunch, if you're still doing the 9 to 5 thing, you could decide to grab something that's healthy and eat an apple and go for a walk. There's so many things that you can do, but we're not taught how to set ourselves up for optimal health, period. We simply aren't. So, um, that addresses some simple things that people could do that make it more affordable. But to be totally transparent, and I guess on a more practical matter, it is absolutely true. When I went through my journey, while the surgery and things like that were covered through insurance, everything else that I did to heal myself was not covered by insurance, and it can get spendy.
Mhm.
And I was creative in a lot of different ways. I did some trades, which I typically don't do, but I do them when they make sense and it's a fair exchange and we have a very clear agreement. It gets very messy if you're doing trade and you don't have a clear agreement, because even if you have a verbal conversation about it, you don't have a written agreement about it, so we can really speak it back to one another and make sure we're on the same page, it can get really, really messy. So,
Right.
there's a lot of different things there. And then I started learning about modalities myself so that I could practice some of these things myself. I haven't become certified in anything specific, but I've just kind of dabbled enough in it so that I can, sometimes lead myself through toning exercises or chakra alignments or things like that. It's not easy. And it's a real problem. And it's one of the things that is a really bothersome to me, because when people say to me, Lisa, these things you did sound fantastic and I want to do them, but I don't have the money to do them. I feel that. I've been there and
Yeah.
I do feel that. And I don't have the answers. I wish that I did. I'm very excited that more integrative processes are happening with Western medicine, and we're beginning to bring different modalities together so that we can work in partnership with our Western medicine teams and our alternative
Yeah.
practitioners.
Well, I think it's slowly changing, isn't it? I mean, we do start to see that people are opening themselves up to a variety of different forms of healing. And I think a lot of that actually happened during COVID. And that was like the blessing of COVID, and people were able to be in their homes and virtually kind of see all of this stuff unfold and got a lot out of that. And started to understand that you could still heal even if you were on a Zoom call with somebody, that there is this kind of quantum consciousness that's happening, and quantum physics is of course helping us, as well as Dr. Joe and many other people, that we can affect each other on this other level. And so with that knowledge, we're starting to understand that this is an opportunity to integrate all of these different modalities and different systems, and science is meeting us in spirituality and vice versa. And so it is kind of a really exciting time where, yeah, I just see the blending of the Western and the Eastern, more and more these bridges being made.
And I love that so much. And I want to kind of just segue off of one of the things that you said about how, it became more apparent, especially after the past several years when we had to deal with the pandemic and everything. So I want to talk about slowing down a little bit again, because sometimes we have to slow down to speed up. And I say, a lot of times these are actually, it's more of a time constraint than it is a money thing, right? When it comes to healing. And I think a really good example of that is when we were required to be on lockdown. I remember the LA area, you could actually see the hills. The sky was clear for the first time, and I can't even tell you how long, because I was born in Anaheim and spend time in that area. It was clear. So think about that. Like, just tap into the energy of that and realize that by us being forced to slow down, and trust me, I didn't like being mandated to do anything, but that's another story. Um, but when we are forced to slow down, look what happens. The beauty of nature, it was restored. The pollution dissipated. That's the same thing that happens with your body when you slow down and you fuel it with good food. Pure
Mm.
water, filtered water. I think that's a really good example, because we all remember seeing that. That was mind blowing.
There's a documentary out there. I don't remember the name of it right now, but there is a documentary about that. And I started to just watch the beginning of it, and they were talking about how the animals started to kind of come out of the forests and start to move about as if, you know, gosh, all the fear and all the anxiousness and all the stress and all the pollution and all the noise was gone. And they
Right.
like, it was like the earth again, like this coming home for the animals. And I thought, oh my God, that's so special. And I love that you brought that analogy up, because it's so true. It's so counterintuitive for most of us to think that to slow down to speed up. And to riff off of that, it's like, yeah, when we slow down, we connect to spirituality. When we slow down, we connect to meditation. When we slow down, we connect to our hearts. We feel, we hear, and that re-regulates our system and also manages our vibration and like we're vibrating at a different place. And when you're saying speed up, it's like we will evolve that way because we're in tune and in coherence with life, right? Which is God, which is source. So it's such a beautiful thing that you said.
Yeah, and it reminds me of a quote that I used in the book, which is slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And so when you slow down, things get smoother. And when things are smoother, you can move forward more quickly. And interestingly enough, that is a quote that originated from the Navy SEALs. And they have to work at high levels in synchronicity with one another in multiple ways. So it might seem like a strange thing for me to include in a book about healing, but it makes so much sense. That's how they're able to do their secret missions and all these things that they do.
I love that so much that you just brought it to that. That's incredible. I didn't know that, but that makes so much sense with the synchronicities, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Such good reminders today. Oh my goodness. I really appreciate all that you said. So, as we're kind of breathing into this, what would you like to kind of leave viewers with today? And I'll have in the show notes how they can find you. But any last kind of thoughts as we're wrapping up our conversation around what you'd like them to know?
Yeah, I really would just like everyone to pause and be true to you and think about, you know, is what I'm doing right now important? Does it really matter? I think that's something that we all should lean into and also determine what really does matter and be brave enough to let go of the things that no longer serve. Don't hold on to what isn't serving you anymore or what might be causing you to become ill. That was a big, big lesson for me.
Mm. So don't hold on to what was causing you to be ill. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the questions that I asked myself when I was sitting in inquiry was like, oh my gosh, did I kill myself for this? And what is this?
Ooh, I love that. Say that again. Did I kill myself?
For this, and what is this? And I was thinking about my business structure because I'm a bit of a workaholic. That has shifted, of course, since I went through all of this, but it was how I determined my self-worth.
I bet so many women, especially women, because we both work with women and women entrepreneurs, it's like as we've restructured, let's say, consciousness from we're like moving away from patriarchy and we're starting to get more of a voice as women. A lot of women, I would imagine, resonate with what you just said. Like their identity has become how do I impact the world? How do I get to equality in the world? How do I, help raise the planet? How do I, like, there's so much energy behind women's movements and really wanting to kind of be visible and show ourselves and do what maybe men have felt like they've been doing for a long time. Isn't that interesting?
It's so fascinating, and it's just something to sit in an inquiry with.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for those potent questions.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's always such a delight to connect. I mean, we could just sit here and talk all day.
I could, and I was like looking at the time and I'm thinking this could go on for days. I would be happy to continue this and have another one and another one. So thank you so much for coming and sharing your wisdom. I always love hearing the things that you have to say. You always have such great, I mean, it makes uh, you know, it's not a question here that you are a writer and that you are a marketer because you've just got these phrases, these drops, these pearls of wisdom that just flow. But they are really poignant and they're great questions. So I hope people wrote those things down. And if they need more journaling prompts, this is what the whole book is about. I read it and it's got amazing prompts in it to go through the journey, right, that you're describing.
Yes, it really is powerful, and I love hearing from readers. I'm getting such great feedback from it, and honestly, this is what makes me really feel extremely full. I love helping people with their businesses too, but knowing that it's activating the ability for people to really embrace the fact that they can heal themselves.
Yes.
That is like golden.
Yes, that's amazing. The power in the hands of the people, once again. Yeah. Thank you so much, Lisa, for coming.
Thank you.
Pleasure to have you here. Please check out this magnanimous woman and go to rightoncreative.com or spiritualsugar.com and just share the love with her and all of us. And we hope that you really enjoyed this talk. And again, if you would love to hear more talks like this, please subscribe to the Empowered Woman podcast. You will meet so many amazing and extraordinary women here. So much blessings. Thank you so much, sister. Mwah.
Thank
Have a beautiful
you.
day. Beautiful day, everybody.